The Galactic Council's misunderstanding of humanity. The Galactic Council Chamber was a grand and imposing space designed to reflect the power and majesty of the countless species that gathered within. Massive curved walls stretched upward, adorned with shimmering holograms of the many civilizations that inhabited the galaxy. The council members, from species of all shapes and sizes, sat on their elevated thrones, their eyes fixed on the central platform where the discussion would unfold. Tension hung in the air like a thick fog, and the murmur of hushed conversations filled the room as the debate on the future of the galaxy was about to begin. At the center of it all stood Commander K, his towering 7-foot frame exuding raw power. His scales, a dark, reptilian green, reflected the chamber's artificial light, while his sharp eyes narrowed with contempt. As a core, his species was known for their brutal conquest of lesser civilizations, and K's position as the military commander of the core fleet made him one of the most feared leaders in the galaxy. His voice, when he spoke, had the weight of centuries of warfare behind it. "Humans," he sneered, addressing the gathered council, "are weak. They haven't participated in a single galactic conflict in over a millennium. They hide behind their fragile diplomacy, too scared to get their hands dirty. Their alliances mean nothing. Their treaties are worthless." A ripple of agreement spread through the council as various species, some of whom had been at the receiving end of human diplomacy, nodded in collective disdain. For centuries, the human race had avoided wars, maintaining a careful distance from the violence that defined so much of galactic history. While other species fought and bled, humanity stood on the sidelines, negotiating peace where others waged war. They were the diplomats, the traders, the brokers of peace, but it had made them something of a laughingstock. These humans have built their empire not on strength but on words. Kay continued, his voice dripping with derision. Their so-called Terran Empire thrives on soft power, diplomatic bargaining, trade deals, and alliances, while real warriors like us fight for survival. It's time we remind them of their place. The murmurs of the council intensified. The humans had earned a reputation as pacifists, reluctant to involve themselves in the galaxy's ongoing conflicts. To many, it seemed cowardly. Commander K, with his long history of war and conquest, found it impossible to believe that such a species could contribute anything meaningful to the galaxy's struggles. The humans were seen as weak, their refusal to fight viewed as a form of cowardice. "We need them," said Saul, a slender amphibious species whose skin shimmered with shades of deep blue, his voice smooth and calculated. "The Krogan are a force like no other. If we are to defeat them, we need the Terran Empire's resources. Their technological advancements, their vast fleets, they could tip the scales in our favor." But they refused to join the fight. The council's faces tightened with concern. The Krogan, a savage species of warriors, had waged a brutal war for decades. Entire star systems had fallen under their relentless onslaught. The galaxy was bleeding, and the council knew they needed every advantage to defeat the Krogan. The humans, with their technology, resources, and vast star systems, seemed like the perfect ally. But the problem was that the humans had refused to take sides. They had always stayed out of galactic wars, preferring negotiation and diplomacy over the horrors of combat. It was this refusal to participate in the ongoing conflict that had earned them the council's scorn. "Perhaps we should issue an ultimatum," suggested Ytalin, a tall and angular being whose sharp features were illuminated by the flickering lights of the chamber. His eyes narrowed in thought. "We force them to choose. Either they fight with us against the Krogan, or we strip them of their empire piece by piece. Take their resources, dismantle their precious fleets, force them into submission." Commander K's eyes gleamed with a predatory glint as he paced back and forth. "Yes, let them see the reality of war. Their empire, their fragile existence will mean nothing when the Krogan come knocking. They will either join us or be crushed under the weight of their own inaction." The council nodded in agreement. The decision seemed inevitable. They would issue a message, a direct demand for the Terran Empire's involvement in the war. If the humans refused, they would be forced into the conflict. The Krogan had to be stopped, and the Terran Empire's reluctance to join the war would no longer be tolerated. But what the Council didn't understand, what they couldn't know, was that humanity's refusal to join the war had never been out of fear, it was strategy. The Terran Empire had not forgotten how to fight. They had simply chosen not to, believing that their survival in the galaxy depended on avoiding conflict. The humans had learned the painful lessons of war in their past, and they had chosen peace as their path. But peace had a price, and that price was now being tested. The message was sent. It was broadcast across the galaxy, a demand that echoed through the cosmos on every frequency, in every known language. The tone was condescending, a thinly veiled threat to the Terran Empire. Join us in the war against the Krogan, or face the consequences. Your resources, your empire, will be dismantled if you refuse. The Council waited with bated breath. It was a decision that would shape the future of the galaxy. And for the first time, the Council felt confident. The humans would surely back down. They would beg for mercy, just as Kay had predicted. They would surrender without a fight. But 2 days later, the Council received a response. It was brief, almost disappointingly so. 3 simple words appeared on the screen. We accept. Prepare. Commander Kay stared at the message, his confidence faltering for the first time. His sharp eyes narrowed in disbelief. What is this? He growled, the words tumbling from his lips as a sense of dread began to creep over him. This isn't the response of a frightened species. Saul, uneasy beside him, shifted. Perhaps they intend to offer support from a distance, providing resources but not soldiers, he suggested, trying to make sense of the situation. He shook his head, his mind racing. No, this isn't right. The message is clear. They're joining the war. But why so suddenly? Why so casually? They should be begging for mercy, not sending a simple acceptance. The Council members exchanged uneasy glances. The earlier bravado evaporated, replaced by uncertainty. The humans' response was too calm, too measured. It was not the reaction of a species reluctantly dragged into conflict. It was the response of a species that had been waiting for an excuse to unleash something far greater. The Terran Empire unveiled. The days following the brief yet unsettling message from the Terran Empire were filled with nervous anticipation. Across the galaxy, the Galactic Council had already begun preparations for what they assumed would be a swift and easy campaign, aided by the resources and technology of the Terran Empire. The core were confident, as they always were. They had been through countless wars and faced adversaries far stronger than the humans could ever hope to be. What could a race of diplomats and peacekeepers possibly bring to the table in such a brutal conflict? Commander Kay paced restlessly in his private chamber aboard the flagship, Vortex of Fury, as he reviewed the data on the Terran fleet. His mind was still reeling from the human response. We accept. Prepare. There was no begging, no hesitation. The message had been cold, efficient, and disturbingly confident. It wasn't the behavior of a species that feared war. It was the behavior of a species ready for it. Why are they so calm? Kay muttered to himself. This is far too calculated. This is not the response of a frightened people. His officer, Vil, a squat insectoid with chitinous armor and compound eyes, hovered nearby, waiting for his superior's command. We have received further information from our scouts, Commander. The Terran fleets are mobilizing. Their forces are not as large as ours, but they are well-trained. Kay interrupted, his voice sharp with frustration. We know little about their military capabilities. They've been hiding behind diplomacy and trade for centuries. Now they suddenly decide to join the war. Tell me, Vil, how does a species that hasn't fought a major war in over 1,000 years suddenly become battle-hardened? Vil paused, unsure of how to respond. The Terran Empire's military records were classified and meticulously guarded. No one knew the full extent of their strength. only the rumors, well-trained soldiers, highly advanced technologies, and fleets that had been kept under wraps. But Commander K's suspicion only grew stronger. There was more to humanity than met the eye, and for the first time in his career, he felt a gnawing doubt creeping in, the kind of doubt that could cost an entire empire. Perhaps, Vil began cautiously, they are just waiting for the right moment. We know their military has been focused on exploration and trade protection, but they must have kept something hidden. Something to give them the edge in case they were ever forced to fight. K's gaze hardened. Yes, something hidden, he muttered, and that something might just be the end of us. The council convened again in their grand chamber, and this time, the atmosphere was markedly different. Where there had once been confidence, there was now a palpable tension. The Terran message had shattered the illusion that they were dealing with an easily manipulated species. The council members were uneasy, exchanging nervous glances as they prepared for the next steps. The usual bravado was absent. No one dared speak over the others as they waited for Commander K to begin. "Everything is in motion," K said, his voice tight with frustration. "The Terran Empire has responded, and they have agreed to join the war. But something isn't right. We assumed they were weak, unwilling to engage. But now they're playing this game with cold precision. We've underestimated them. We've made a grave mistake." A murmur ran through the chamber. The other species, once certain that they could manipulate the humans, now felt a twinge of fear. The Terran Empire wasn't backing down. They were stepping forward. The council members knew that the humans had vast resources, but what of their military? The fleets they'd seen in recent scans weren't impressive. The ships were modern, sure, but nothing compared to the power of the core or the Krogan war machines. Yet there was an unsettling quality to the human forces, an undercurrent of potential that the council couldn't shake. "We've received word from our intelligence network," said Saul, the amphibious being, his voice low. "The Terran fleet is indeed not as large as ours, but it's growing, and we've discovered something troubling. They've begun deploying new ships that weren't on any of our previous records. We've seen designs that are unfamiliar." Commander K's eyes narrowed. Unfamiliar designs. What does that mean? "It means," Saul continued, his voice steady despite the mounting tension, "that the Terran Empire is not just playing along. They've been preparing. They've been ready for something like this. Their fleets, their soldiers, they're not what they seem. And their response is too controlled. They know exactly what they're doing." K clenched his fists, his sharp claws digging into the armrests of his chair. The realization hit him like a thunderclap. We've underestimated them, all of us. These humans, they're not afraid of war. They've just been waiting for the right moment. They've been hiding their true strength for centuries, and now they've decided it's time to unleash it. The chamber fell silent. No one spoke for several long moments. The council members exchanged uneasy glances. The realization that they had misjudged humanity was too much to bear. The human empire had kept its cards close to its chest, and now it seemed they were preparing to reveal their hand. "They're ready," K muttered, his voice a low growl. "They've been waiting. They'll fight, and they'll fight hard." At that moment, the holographic display in the center of the chamber flickered to life. The message from the Terran Empire had been received, broadcast across every known frequency, every language understood by the council. The three simple words that followed sent a shockwave through the chamber. "We accept. Prepare." There was no negotiation, no plea for mercy, just a cold, calculated acceptance. The humans had decided that the time for diplomacy had passed. They had chosen their side, and now, the galaxy would pay the price. K stood, fists clenched, his scales bristling with barely contained fury. "We have no choice now. Prepare for war. The Terran Empire is coming, and we will see just what they are capable of." The council members shifted uneasily, each now realizing that they had set in motion the very conflict they had hoped to avoid. The Terran Empire was no longer just a silent player in the galaxy. It was a force to be reckoned with. And what's more, they had been hiding their true capabilities for centuries, waiting for the right moment to strike. The question now was not whether humanity would fight, but how the galaxy would survive the fury of a species that had been waiting in the shadows, biding its time, until the moment was right. Humanity's hidden power. The days that followed the Terran Empire's response were filled with feverish activity in the Galactic Council chambers. The realization that they had miscalculated humanity's position sent ripples of panic through the chamber, and the atmosphere that once brimmed with confidence was now clouded with doubt and fear. Commander K, typically the embodiment of martial confidence, found himself consumed by a gnawing unease. His species, the core, were built for war. They thrived in it. But now, he couldn't shake the feeling that the galaxy's most dangerous warriors might not be the ones with the largest fleets, but the ones who had learned the art of survival and restraint. The Terran message was as simple as it was terrifying. We accept. Prepare. There was no bombast, no threats, only an unequivocal statement of readiness. The Terran Empire was no longer hiding in the shadows. They had made their decision, and it was now clear to K and the Council that they had been playing a much larger game than anyone had realized. For centuries, humans had avoided the front lines of war, preferring diplomacy and trade over bloodshed. They had been seen as weak, as mere negotiators, and yet they were now joining the conflict with the same calmness that had always been their hallmark. The next few days saw a flurry of activity across the galaxy. The human fleet, once thought to be an underdeveloped force, began to reveal its true capabilities. Commander K watched in disbelief as intelligence reports flooded in from scouts who had been tracking human movements in their star systems. The human ships were unlike anything the Council had seen before. There was no mistaking it. The designs were unconventional, sleek, and purposeful. They were crafted for speed, efficiency, and devastating firepower. How is this possible? K muttered to himself, scrolling through the data on his terminal. How could they have hidden this for so long? The reports spoke of new class ships, their designs utilizing advanced cloaking technology, hyper-accelerated weapon systems, and shockwave emitters capable of obliterating enemy vessels with one well-placed strike. The human fleet's true size, once thought small and insignificant, was now revealed to be vast, spread out across multiple sectors. It wasn't just the technology that was surprising. It was the precision of the human forces, their coordination, and their surprising ability to adapt. It was as if they had been waiting for a moment like this for centuries, perfecting their military strategies in silence, while the rest of the galaxy fought and bled for dominance. Commander K's frustration mounted. He had long believed that humanity's refusal to fight was out of weakness, a testament to their cowardice. But now, the truth was undeniable. They hadn't been afraid of war. They had been preparing for it. And when the call came, they responded with cold, methodical precision. What the Council had perceived as fear was, in fact, their greatest strength. The ability to wait, to think, and to move with calculated efficiency. Across the Council, whispers began to emerge. Leaders from all corners of the galaxy exchanged glances, their previous arrogance now replaced by the slow realization that the humans they had underestimated were not what they seemed. The core, who had prided themselves on their battle-hardened warriors, now found themselves facing an enemy they had never truly understood. The Krogan, the brutal and relentless species that had ravaged the galaxy for decades, had long been a threat. But now, there was a new fear in the air, one that whispered of humanity's untapped potential, their ability to strategize and fight with an almost unnerving level of discipline. The Krogan had never seen such tactics, and now the core were uncertain whether their own reputation as the galaxy's deadliest species would be enough to secure victory. In a quiet corner of the Galactic Council chamber, Saul, the amphibious diplomat, turned to the others, his voice barely above a whisper. The humans, they've been preparing for this war. All this time, we thought they were afraid, but they were simply waiting for the right moment. The council members exchanged uneasy glances. It wasn't just the Terran military strength that troubled them. It was the methodical nature of their response, the calmness with which they had accepted the challenge, and the unsettling truth that humanity had always been capable of war, only they had chosen not to engage. Now, the council realized humanity was no longer waiting. They were stepping into the fray, not out of fear, but because they had been forced to. Their survival instinct had kicked in, and now the galaxy would feel the weight of their response. "I told you," Kay growled, his voice low and filled with a mixture of anger and disbelief. "I told you they weren't afraid." The realization was sinking in for everyone. Humanity had always been a force waiting to be unleashed, biding its time, and now that time had come. Back on Earth, the Terran Empire was mobilizing with an efficiency that stunned even the most seasoned military minds. In less than 48 hours, their fleets were deployed, their battle plans already set in motion. The human ships, sleek and streamlined, began to move toward the warfront, each vessel armed with weapons capable of leveling entire planets if necessary. They were not only fighting to defend their empire, they were fighting to show the galaxy that they would not be underestimated again. In the heart of Terra Prime, the capital planet, President Evelyn Carter stood before the holoscreen, watching as the fleets assembled in orbit. She had always known that this moment would come, but she had hoped it would not be so soon. The Terran Empire had spent centuries negotiating peace, finding solutions where others had resorted to violence. But now, that peace had been shattered by the Galactic Council's threats. The response from humanity had been swift. The entire population had rallied behind the call to arms. Citizens from all walks of life, from every corner of the empire, stood ready to defend their homes, their families, and their way of life. The human spirit, it seemed, had finally awoken. "We accept," the message had said. "Prepare." The Terran Empire was ready. And they weren't just preparing to fight. They were preparing to win. President Carter watched the final fleet ships leave orbit, their engines blazing with the promise of vengeance. Humanity had been forced into this conflict, but they would not go down easily. This was no longer a question of survival. It was a statement of power. And the rest of the galaxy would soon learn that humanity's greatest weapon wasn't their technology, their fleets, or their soldiers. It was their unwavering resolve. Commander K and the Galactic Council would soon realize that the humans they had dismissed as pacifists were far more dangerous than anyone had anticipated. The war had begun, and this time, humanity would not be standing on the sidelines.